On the morning of February 17, 1944, Truk Lagoon was still waking up. Inside the reef, Japanese ships sat at anchor. Transports, auxiliary vessels, fuel stores, aircraft, spare parts, ammunition. Everything Japan needed to keep a forward base alive was packed into one protected lagoon. This was not just another harbor. To Japan, Truk was one of the most important bases in the South Pacific. A fortress surrounded by coral, a repair stop, a supply hub, a place where ships could hide, refuel, and prepare for the next move. The Japanese believed distance protected it. They believed the reef protected it. They believed the airfields and anti-aircraft guns protected it. But out beyond the horizon, American carrier aircraft were already in the air. 3 years earlier, Japan had used carrier aircraft to strike Pearl Harbor and shock the United States into war. Now the same logic was coming back across the Pacific. Only this time, the carriers were American. And the harbor that thought it was safe belonged to Japan. Truk looked secure because, on paper, it had everything a fortress needed. The lagoon was wrapped inside a natural reef. The water inside was calm enough for ships to anchor. The islands held airfields, guns, repair facilities, fuel, and supplies. From Truk, Japan could support operations across the South Pacific. On a map, it also looked far away. Far enough that Japanese planners could believe an American carrier strike would be difficult to launch, difficult to sustain, and difficult to pull off without warning. That was the illusion. Truk was not weak because it had no defenses. It was weak because so many valuable things were concentrated in one place. Aircraft were parked near the runways. Ships were sitting inside the lagoon. Fuel and supplies were stored close to the harbor. Repair facilities, ammunition, and logistics were all tied to the same base. If an attacker could get aircraft over Truk, the fortress would stop looking like a shield. It would start looking like a target list. The American plan was direct. First, hit the eyes and fists of the base. If Japanese aircraft could get into the air, they could intercept the strike. If the airfields stayed open, the ships in the harbor still had a shield. So the first American aircraft drove toward the runways and parked planes. Fighters swept low over the airfields. Bombers hit the runways and facilities. Japanese aircraft that should have been climbing into the sky were caught on the ground. Smoke began to rise from the airfields. Anti-aircraft guns opened up. But the American strike groups were already breaking into their attack runs. That was the first crack in the fortress. Once the airfields were under pressure, the ships inside the lagoon became exposed. Some vessels were still at anchor. Others began to move, trying to shift away from their original positions. Guns on the ships fired upward. Shore batteries joined in. But Truk was not the open ocean. It was a lagoon wrapped inside a reef. That reef had once been protection. Now, it limited movement. American pilots did not have to hunt targets across thousands of miles of ocean. The targets were inside the harbor. Transports, oilers, auxiliary ships, docks, airfields, and supply areas were all inside the same strike zone. After the first waves suppressed the airfields, the next waves began looking into the harbor itself. One transport ship became a target. It was not a battleship. It was not an aircraft carrier. It was not the kind of ship that looks impressive in a history book. But that was the point. The danger was not the hull. The danger was what it carried. Fuel, ammunition, vehicles, spare parts, supplies. For a forward base, those things are blood. An American aircraft came down toward the harbor. Machine guns from the ship began chasing it. Shore guns lifted their barrels and tried to catch it in the dive. The pilot could not wait too long. A few seconds too late, and the aircraft would fly into a thicker wall of fire. Too early, and the bomb could fall harmlessly into the water. He did not aim for the most famous target. He aimed for the ship that kept the base alive. The bomb fell. When it hit, the first result was not just an explosion. It was disorder. Fire pushed up from the deck. Black smoke rolled into the air. Nearby ships began turning away from the burning vessel. Men on the dock started running. Guns were still firing, but the rhythm was breaking. That was Truk's real weakness. the Americans were not just hitting ships. They were hitting the tempo of the entire base. One burning transport forced nearby ships to move. Moving ships crowded the harbor. A crowded harbor made new targets easier to spot. And every new target gave the next wave something to attack. The strike kept expanding. Some aircraft turned toward harbor facilities. Others swept back across the airfields. Others pressed down toward ships on the water. One target began smoking, and another became visible. One supply area caught fire, and the base lost another piece of its ability to function. Truck had been built around concentration. Concentrated ships, concentrated aircraft, concentrated fuel, concentrated logistics. That made it efficient. Now it made it vulnerable. This is what made Operation Hailstone so damaging. It was not only about sinking individual vessels. It was about breaking Truk as a forward base. Japan had placed ships, aircraft, fuel, repair capacity, ammunition, and supplies inside one protected system. But once American carrier aircraft forced their way over that system, every part of it became connected in the worst possible way. A ship on fire disrupted the harbor. A damaged runway trapped aircraft on the ground. A burning supply area slowed repairs. Smoke made coordination harder. Confusion made the next attack more effective. By the time the operation was over, Truk no longer looked like a safe anchorage. There were wrecks in the lagoon. Aircraft had been destroyed. Harbor facilities had been damaged. Supplies had burned. The base that Japan had counted on as a major South Pacific support point had been badly shaken. And this part matters: Operation Hailstone did not destroy the entire Japanese combined fleet. Some of Japan's major warships had already left Truk before the attack. But that does not make the strike small. A fleet does not live on warships alone. It lives on fuel. It lives on transports. It lives on maintenance, ammunition, airfields, repair crews, and supply rhythm. After Truk was hit, Japan did not just lose ships and aircraft. It lost the breathing capacity of a forward base. And more importantly, the United States proved something Japan could no longer ignore. The Japanese rear area was no longer safe. That is why Truk became a reverse Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor was not just remembered because bombs hit ships. It mattered because carrier aircraft appeared over a harbor that believed distance and routine still offered protection. In a few hours, that belief collapsed. At Truk Lagoon in 1944, the logic turned around. This time, the carrier aircraft were American. This time, the harbor belonged to Japan. And the side that had once shocked the world with a surprise carrier strike was now feeling the same rule applied against its own Pacific fortress. In carrier warfare, the most dangerous thing is not always how far you are from the enemy. It is how much you place inside one location you believe the enemy cannot reach.